Welcome to Gravers Lane Gallery. It seems like we have some new folks here and some friends and some longtime gallery friends. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're so happy you're here, and we're so happy that Kelly's here. She made the trip to be able to speak about her work. My name is Chloe the Pichon. I'm director of the gallery, and I'm joined by the wonderful team at Gravers Lane Gallery. Bruce Hoffman is here. David is here, Kate's here, and Leslie's there, and Mia. Mia's our new addition right there. So after the talk, if you have any questions about what you see, just grab one of us. We'd be happy to tell you anything you want to know about the work you see in the gallery. I need to hold that. Sure. So Gravers Lane Gallery is dedicated to contemporary craft. We're passionate about educating our audience, introducing new artists to our community, and expanding our collective understanding of what craft is and what it can be. This month, we're proud to present two exhibitions. So over there, we have Ellie Richards' Bright House. And unfortunately, Ellie Richards is in LA right now, so she couldn't make it to the opening, but she might be here May 2nd, so stay tuned. She might be able to give us a little talk about her work. Her work is a playful exploration of furniture, sculpture, and design. She obtained her BFA at University of Dayton, Ohio, and an MFA from Arizona State University. She was awarded 3 Wingate residencies, and the body of work that you see in that room is a result of her 3-year residency at the Penland School of Craft. Her goal was to make work from found and reclaimed materials and to try new approaches to traditional woodworking techniques. She aimed to make abstract forms in order to loosen her approach to furniture making. The exhibition is about play, it's about games and interactive thinking, where different elements come together to form endless creative wholes and stories. Ellie's work is about fluidity, responding to materials, blending function and spontaneity in a truly unique way. If you'd like to know more about her work, just grab one of us after the talk. And I'm going to pass the mic to Kate, and Kate will introduce Ellie.
Yep. Okay. So Kelly's work draws inspiration from the 1965 animated short, The Dot and the Line, A Romance in Lower Mathematics, by Chuck Jones and Maurice Noble, where a line discovers complexity and depth within itself in purity of its true love, the dot. Similarly, Kelly's work explores the idea of connection, both literal and metaphorical. Each piece is born from an accumulation of repeated gestures. I met Kelly through UArt, and I'm so honored to be exhibiting her work. So with that being said, Kelly, take it away.
Hi, thank you everyone for being here tonight. I see some friendly faces in the audience, which is just really heartwarming and wonderful. And I just want to start by thanking Gravers Lane Gallery so much for having me here, and for the whole team, especially Chloe and Kate, who've been so incredible to work with through this whole process of bringing this show together. And just as a mission, as a gallery, for carrying craft forward and holding the legacy of craft as a thing that we all really hold dear. So I just want to start my talk. I also meant to say thank you to Don Miller, to Mi-Kyung Lee, to Rod McCormick, and all the other folks in attendance here who have been such great mentors over my career and just great cheerleaders of my work, and also to my partner Eric, who has been so loving and patient by my side through the whole chaos of my process. Let's not talk about that. So I just want to give a basic idea of how it is that this work comes together. So all the work that you see in the gallery behind you, which I hope everyone had a chance to take a look at the work, is constructed by one simple form of connection. I actually brought some material here to demonstrate. Everything is made with Mardi Gras beads. I had a childhood memory of playing with these Mardi Gras beads as a sort of self-soothing stim. I think a lot of people have a similar memory of just like fidgeting with a strand of Mardi Gras beads. And something that happens when you play with these necklaces is that you can just pop the beads together. And they sort of hold in tension. So that form of connection is what basically is the building block upon which I've built all of this work. So all of the pieces, they're not threaded by me. They're pre-threaded, but they are also not glued in place. All of the strands are interwoven, and they basically just hold in tension. And I was attracted to this, compelled to this process because there's something really wonderful about finding a property that is inherent to the material that you're working with and letting the material guide you through what it wants to become. I started working in this method, I think sometime after I'd left school. I was thinking a lot about textile structure, and I was working on the loom a lot, and I think I got to a point where I realized that what really was getting my juices flowing about weaving was less the weaving process, but rather the programming of the loom and thinking about woven structure. So I know a lot of weavers, it really happens in the moment that the threads are coming together. But for me, I found myself getting lost more so in like weaving software, basically. I found the loom was a little bit not super adaptive to my body. It would cause me some pain. I have long nights in the studio. And I found myself a little bit frustrated one difficult winter. And I was walking through a Joann Fabrics, RIP. So Joann was the genesis of this work, essentially. I was just sort of dissociating and just, looking at all the bright colors in the sort of kids craft section. And I saw some packs of Mardi Gras beads, and I was just immediately compelled. I had that memory, and I said oh, I can make a weaving out of this, So I took them home, and I didn't do the thing that I was supposed to do, but I did that instead. And I didn't show it to anyone for a while. And in the moment, it felt like it was a little bit subversive of my training in studio craft, that, I was working with this material that, is seen to be cheap and disposable and a little bit tacky or, chintzy. But as I continued to work with the material, I kept coming back to it, and I found different ways of putting it together that it took on new material properties, to the point where I started applying some of the things that I was thinking about in woven fabric to the structure of the woven beads, particularly thinking about multi-cloth textile weaving. So if you think about, a textile as being warp and then weft, thinking about structures that build warp on weft on warp on weft on warp on weft, and building into 3 dimensions. And the beads allowed me to do that off loom and gave me sort of new possibilities of working with material. So, they say wherever you go, there you are. So I found my way back into, my traditional training in contemporary craft, that I was building up my own process and my own sort of vocabulary of process working with this material. And so over the years, I tried to sort of push into new ways of working with the material, finding new possibilities in it. And, when the work was coming together for this show in particular, I found myself thinking about the 1965 short film by Chuck Jones called The Dot and the Line, A Romance in Lower Mathematics. It's on YouTube. It's 20 minutes. It's a really cute watch. The story, as Kate mentioned, is about a very plain line that falls in love with a perfect dot. She has perfect symmetry, perfect ratios, everything. But she finds the line boring. And instead, she's drawn to a wily squiggle because, she sees the squiggle as being free form and spontaneous. And so the line is heartbroken, but then looks within itself and tries to figure out how it can become something new. And so the line starts to make angles and shapes and drawings and patterns. And so the line takes all of these newfound, things and goes back to the dot. And suddenly the dot sees the beauty of the line. And whereas she saw that, the squiggle was spontaneous and fun, now she sees that the squiggle is chaotic and like lacking in structure and substance. And so as the film concludes, to the vector goes the spoils. So when I sort of brought that in as the theme of the show, I was reflecting on that sort of growth process in my own work, and I think it's something that's really valuable, as like humans in general as well, to just find, more, to continue to always work to find more depth in yourself and new possibilities in yourself. I started to think about the nature of romance as well. And, I think that we define romance as, love between people. But the best definition that I could find of romance is a feeling of remoteness from everyday life. Romance is a feeling that transports us. And, I think that that is where art finds its success and its ability to transport us, and I'll touch on that again later. But as the connective tissue for this thread, I wanted to include in each piece just some sort of visual metaphor that represents the process of like finding love or finding connection or the feelings that come of falling in love. So in the piece Union, there's like a merging. In the piece in the window, Serpentine, there's the feeling of like a roller coaster that comes with like the sort of whiplash of the back and forth and the chaos of that whole process. In the piece Dual, there's like a entwining. But some of the pieces do also have mathematical references, which I will talk about now, which I'm sure everyone is very excited to hear about. In the piece Tetrahedron, I created that piece. There was sort of an exploration of taking one simple shape, which is a tetrahedron, which is a pyramid that's formed with four perfect triangles, four-sided, 6 edges on this shape. And so when I networked these together, it created a form that on its front and its back, that it has this reflective quality. So if you were to turn this piece over, it would look the same on the back, but the colors would be inverted. And so when the blue lines, which are going this way, kind of show through the yellow lines, you can see this merging of this like beautiful grid that starts to happen. Again, that melding becoming the visual representation of romance. The piece Reticulate, I have a good friend that I met when I was in Houston who is an engineer at Texas A&M University. And one thing, I often connect a lot with people in STEM fields. Those are the folks who really get very excited about the work. This friend of mine, Scott, we had talked about tiling patterns before. He introduced me to the idea of like non-repeating tiles, like the Penrose tile, and was very excited to tell me a couple years ago in 2023 that they discovered a tile that with one shape, you can repeat it an infinite number of times and it will never cause a repeat. And that was a solution to Einstein's problem. Very exciting that even in 2023, we can have these like huge mathematical breakthroughs. So when I was making this piece, I wanted to find a tiling pattern with a very specific set of rules. I was like, I need intersections with only 4 edges and triangles and squares. Like, let's make it happen. And so I realized at that same time, we found this tiling pattern at the same time, which I'm so sorry, I'm gonna have to look at my notes for this one, is called a rhombi trihexagonal tiling pattern. And apparently there's a whole system of notations in these tiling patterns, which a tiling pattern is basically repetition of geometric shapes where there's no gaps in between. There's a system of notations that can describe any regular tiling pattern based on like how many vertices there are, how many shapes there are around the vertices, the vertex, and how many sides on the shape. And it's just amazing to me that like you can have this infinite way of describing all of these different occurrences in the mathematical world. I translated that tiling pattern with the translucent beads that have the little pink trout beads trapped in the middle, trout beads being a material that's used to create like fishing lures. They look like synthetic roe, and so therefore they have this like really enticing glow to them. So this piece has this like inner glow that's like this blush that you feel of like when something is just like starting to percolate in you and you're just really excited. And to me, the piece, like, you turn it over and it reminds me of the feeling of turning over a leaf and seeing the beautiful like veining structure. And you're obviously welcome to see whatever it is for you in that piece. But what I realized is that I love mathematics because it finds all of these different ways to define things. And I love textiles for the same reason, I think one of the things I love about textiles, I've always been into weaving drafts and punch cards and all of these things, all of the notations that we use to describe the plan for a textile, because these objects are just as beautiful as the thing that it's producing. But what I love about textiles is that when you take that object and you pull it out into the real world, that there is a material presence to that thing that is unquantifiable. And to me, that is romance. It is that feeling of that emotional resonance and response that comes to the work in real life and your experience with that thing. So I think the next thing I'm going to talk about, there's 3 pieces in this show that rhyme. There's knot, taut, and rot. Knot is this gold piece here, which is meant to describe the nerves that come with, like, again, when something is happening and you're just very unsure and you're very anxious, kind of like that feeling of like turning yourself inside out, which is sort of like the feeling I felt all week getting ready for this artist talk. The technical challenge that came with this piece, I was thinking a lot about topology. I'm not sure if people are familiar with this term. It's kind of come up for me a lot in like social media, because I'll see these videos that are like, how do you like snake this cord of an appliance through the handle without cutting the plug off? Have you ever heard of the mathematical field of topology? And I'm like, what do these things have to do with each other? But it's basically the study of what are the properties of a form that are unchanged when you morph or you stretch or you manipulate a form without cutting it or stitching it to itself. So essentially, how many holes are in an object? So for topologists, a coffee cup is the same thing as a donut, because if you take all the clay from the cup and you form it back into the handle, it's a donut, which is fascinating. And you see these sort of like weird topological problems pop up, and I'm just like really fascinated by the forms in there. So I was telling my friend, Scott again, how difficult it was to create this like closed form, this closed loop, because every end has to find its way back out of the form without me tying the threads together or without me gluing them together. So I have to have this like roadmap, this plan. It took me hours. It was really like kind of a doozy. And so he said to me like, oh, have you ever heard of knot theory? And I said to him, that's fascinating. Did you ever think about telling me about this sooner? So knot theory is the theory, it's a facet of topology that describes knots. So a knot is any closed loop. The most basic knot is actually just a circle, and it's called an unknot, which I think is beautiful. But there's a whole language around describing, how many like sort of intersections there are, how many times the knot loops back in on itself. And there are over 6 billion knots like categorized based on these parameters, which is fascinating. But again, it's like math having this way of putting into language things that when you pull them into the real world, they take on their own sort of material presence. So the pieces taught and wrought are actual representations of two of the mathematical knots that are in the sort of basic set, the starter kit. I think the final piece I'm going to talk about is it's actually the only piece in the show that wasn't made specifically for the show, but it felt very resonant to the work in this show. It's this piece, the sort of circular, very bright piece just to your left or right when you're walking in here, called Crosscut. So it has a form that can be evocative of many things, of a flower, of a mandala. When I made this piece, I think what I was going for was the moment in a cartoon where their character bursts through the cell to announce themselves, because I think for the people in my life who I'm the most comfortable with, that's how I enter any room, as I'm here. But the piece is called Crosscut, which is named after, it's a type of saw blade, basically. And I'm gonna take a hard left for a second and tell you about when I was a kid. My family would go to the Jersey Shore every year to Seaside Heights, and we would go to this place called the Sawmill Cafe. I don't know if it's still there, but it was a very tiny pizza joint where you could get a pitcher of soda and a pizza the size of the table for $20. So for a family of 6, it was oh, thank God, we can feed everyone. But in this pizza joint, there was this giant mural of the lady tied to the log who's inches away from the saw blade in the sawmill. And it's this really charged image when you think about it. If we narrow our focus away from the sort of very kind of sexist connotations of the damsel in distress trope and just focus on the saw blade for a minute, I think that what the saw blade represents is tension. It's the tension of the moment. Because, when I think about love and I think about romance, and romance, again, in all the forms that it takes, whether it's relationships or finding new community or, taking on new initiatives in your life, that, love is something that asks us to be very vulnerable and to bring our most vulnerable and naked selves to this endeavor. But at the same time, it's something that also asks you to have a very strong sense of yourself, to know yourself so well so that you don't get lost in this thing. And on one side of this thing is the greatest rewards in life, the greatest pleasures. And on the other side of this thing is pain. Because sometimes, things don't go as planned. And sometimes, there's pain. But it's worth pursuing because, again, it's beautiful. And when I go back to the metaphor, talking about these closed loops, or thinking about the process of forming the closed loops and how difficult it was to sort of connect the ends of the piece to itself, I'm just gonna say, for a second that I think that we can all agree in here, and there's a lot of folks I know from my community back at UArts, that it's been a difficult time for many, many reasons, so many reasons, but that, one of them is that there's been so many times in the last however many years that I thought of myself as part of a cycle and a continuing cycle that would have a lifespan beyond me. And it's hard when you think of that and you witness an end where you never thought one should have been, And what's lost in that you don't get to be the person who gets to see people coming into the cycle and seeing this thing have a lifespan beyond you. It's really hard, but, sometimes the antidote is that you have to find new beginnings. And sometimes you have to reconnect your end to your beginning again. And sometimes that work is really freaking hard. And I think that, what's been The only thing that's made me really feel better after seeing the closing of UArts was seeing all the people who have been able to find a new life out of what's remained from the campus, just even the tools in the studio that have this whole lifespan, and to create new initiatives and to create new life out of that. And I think that's beautiful, you know? And it's difficult, but it's important work. I think I'm gonna end there, but I just wanna say that, you know, we are in the most beautiful time of year. The air is incredible, the temperature is wonderful. The birds are migrating north. We don't have buds on the trees yet in Connecticut, but they are here. And the peepers are peeping. And so I just hope everyone just, you know, go out into the world and find the romance in the world around you. Thank you for coming.
I feel like I learned a lot just now, even though we've been talking for many months, and I loved how you wove the mathematics with the emotion, with the human kind of aspect of your work. Yeah, I thought that was really beautiful. So Kelly will be here for the rest of the evening if anyone wants to speak to her. And while I have a captive audience, I have someone very special in my life who's celebrating his 50th birthday, and he's gallery adjacent, but since I have you here, we're just gonna sing happy birthday. You have to come up. Yeah. Come on up. I have a lighter. We have a lighter. We're working on it. Okay. At the end, they'll be lit, I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, his name is Sayat.
Oh, don't sing, please.
Yes.
Here we go.
Happy
birthday
to
you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Sayat. Happy birthday to you.
All right, well, enjoy the art. Thank you. Thanks.
Happy birthday today.
It is actually today.
Do you want to have something in here? Yeah, I do.